Hi, welcome back to another episode of Into the Valley. The Grinch Clement has taken all 3 points from Charlton fans. I was sitting there on Boxing Day. I'd just had my roast dinner, I had a beer in hand, and I was very excited about the game that was coming up. I felt it was a game that we would potentially have an opportunity for an upset. My God, I think I was wrong because it was a
Definitely wrong.
horrid watch.
Yeah, I mean, Clement could have been seen as Grinch, or we were Santa Claus. So we gifted them 3 points.
Both.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of both. But my word, were we on our... I don't even know what you'd call that game, to be honest. Diabolical.
I think it was pretty diabolical. I think the most frustrating thing in looking over it generally as a game, I can accept when we get beaten by the significantly better team. I can kind of accept when we get massively outplayed. And I think there were times in this game where we were, but not as dangerous as other teams have done. But for me, the most frustrating thing walking away from that game is I felt from relatively early on there was a game there for the taking, and I think the lack of competition that we offered in that game, especially in an attacking sense, is pretty unforgivable. Because I just think if we go to, and I think it was summed up the best by, I listened to the interview Curtis Fleming after the game, and I think he kind of summed it up quite well, which was pretty much the way we were playing in that game, we weren't ever going to get anything. It was so out of character. It was so devoid of any creativity. And I think that shows with the stats that I don't think we had a...
But we've struggled with creativity for a while now, and that's something that I brought up multiple times. Like, I feel like our midfield is very lacking in that creative midfield. But the thing that we've always been good at, and when we sort of are keeping ourselves in games, is those moments where we get the set pieces, we get those opportunities to cross the ball in the box. And today, my word, I don't think we beat the first man once.
No.
I think like every single opportunity we got, and that's where we are genuinely very, very effective. And we've done what we did today, and we started the game all right. Like we were in the game, like it was sort of back and forward. Norwich, probably you'd argue, were on top. Norwich had that moment in the game where they were just passing us the ball on the edge of their box every 5 minutes. And even then, we were getting a starting point from sort of the edge of their box and still not being able to create a single thing. And like I say, on top of that, then you've got the fact that we can't beat the first man for a cross the whole entire game.
Yeah,
you're never ever going to get anything from that playing that way.
No, and I think that's how I feel it. When you look at kind of the start of the game, I think Norwich were the team who looked a little bit more dangerous. But actually, after those first 20 minutes, I thought, do you know what? Here's a game for the taking, and here's a game where we can go back and forth with them. And I felt it was going to be one, as it went on, that would be a very, very close encounter that may sneak one side or the other, but we would wake up at points. We would have spells in the game. And I think the most frustrating thing I felt towards it is we were handed on a silver platter moments to get into that game. There was a 10-minute period where I think every single Norwich player was kicking it straight to our player. We were pressing really well, but my God, when we picked up the ball, we just didn't really look like we knew what to do. Even like players that we've been so impressed with, and I thought he showed glimpses, but still looked way off the mark, like Sonny Carey.
Yeah.
He was picking up the ball, he was dribbling, and he did have a few okay runs, but he never really looked massively in control like he normally does, and the movement from other players was poor, and I can't quite put my finger on. We've gone on a 5-game losing streak. We've then got a draw at Birmingham, which is a really, really good result in the grand scheme. We've got that release of pressure on the Oxford game. And as much as I can accept this time of year, there is the schedule and the tiredness. We did nearly have, I think, a full week between the games. It wasn't as tight. I think the games coming up are a little bit tighter together. But also the flip side of it is just... There was very little about what I would say a Charlton Athletic side are about in that, even though we only lost 1-0. And as I say, my frustration to it becomes that I feel there was such a game there that in other games in this season, they're the games that we have managed
to... Even from the start, like we set up in the way that you kind of expected us to make it really difficult for them to break us down, which it was. Like Makama had his one where he sort of backed into us and hit the post, and that was a bit of a let-off there. But even after that, like Norwich sort of huffed and puffed, but there was nothing too mad to worry about. So when we got in at half time at 0-0, I kind of felt like actually Nathan Jones has had a up in the stands to watch the game, you'll have got a good assessment of how we're playing, where the gaps are, all that sort of stuff. And I thought, actually, I expected us to come out in that second half and really push on and make a couple of subs. We got TC, Kelman off the bench. We could start to attack them a bit more. And
Well,
it really didn't happen
It
at
felt
all.
like a classic Nathan Jones performance, didn't it? And then we hit the point where the screw turns or we start creating a few more chances. And I thought, actually, of that second half, the only period where there was any sort of pride was probably towards the beginning of the half, where I thought we were actually getting our foot on the ball a little bit better. And then we just tailed off and just offered very, very little. And as I say, I mean, I don't know what your thoughts were looking at the Norwich team. I don't think there was huge standouts in their team. I was quite disappointed. I thought they, from bits and pieces I've heard, I didn't think their wing play or their kind of central midfield, I thought it was okay. The only real standout for me was McCarmer, who I thought was...
Yeah, he's a handful.
He was a handful. I've heard good things. Obviously, we've got which makes the defeat just that little bit more difficult. Close friend, he's a Norwich fan. I know he's going to be watching right now. But yeah, no, I think for me, he was the standout and offered something that will probably, let's be honest, as Charlton fans, we're screaming out for.
But we've got Lieben, who is literally, and we spoke about it just before we come on here, like, he's literally a carbon copy of McCarmer in terms of his frame. He's like, McCarmer must be like 6'4", 6'5". He's absolutely massive, built big, and he's got decent feet. And that's like literally what Lieben is. And I also was watching that and I was thinking, like, this is how Lieben, we should be utilising Lieben, getting him to back into players. I mean, the first one where he hit the post was exactly what he did for the goal, which was where he backed in, and he, obviously, I know he got fortunate with the way the ball fell to him, but he was just a nuisance in the middle of that box.
But is that not the glimpses we see of Lieben, but not the consistency?
And that's on us as a team as well, to be fair, to actually give him the ball in those areas to really be effective.
I think it's twofold when it comes to that. I think it is on the team, but I also think it is on the player. And
he's got to get in those positions.
Yeah, he's got to get in those positions. But also, far too often we see, even in games where he has opportunities to play like that, he doesn't. And when you look at the kind of form McCarmer's in at the moment, that is what we need to be seeing from certain players. And the realistic side, when we look at it, glimpses of what that player isn't good enough in the Championship.
No.
It has to be a more consistent. I'm not saying you won't go through over a 46-game season. You can have 4 or 5 games you drop off, but there's got to be an element of consistency. Take away the goals, there's got to be an element of consistency to performances. And I think there's far too many players we've got in that team who have an inconsistency in performance, not statistically, because I can accept, and we've discussed this, Charlie Kelman is a great example. I think performance-wise, I've been really, really impressed with what he's offered, especially in the latter games before injury and coming back. I'm not sure I can say that about a lot of other players. I think we can sit here and say, oh, we were wrong about Lieben last week. We can say we were wrong about TC, or we can say this. But then the next week, I feel like we're sitting here saying, actually, no, we're back to where our concerns were. Doherty, we had the exact same conversation. I think there's a big...
We've got too many players that blow hot and cold, and I think at the moment we are still predominantly a League One squad coming up against teams that are established Championship. They've got a depth to their squad. They've got experience in their team where they can fall back sometimes when they're really not on it. They can still fall back on the quality of players that they have. And I think that's where we really bloody struggle, because, for example, today where we just had nothing going up top, we had no answer to that because we didn't have the quality. We didn't have the sort of player that's just going to pick the ball up. Usually that's Carey, to be fair. Someone like Carey, but again, he was really off it. Or Bree, who is able to create a chance from nothing, who literally created no chances.
Well,
so
here's one we're going to go on to later.
Yeah,
And I
so
think we have some...
we had far too many players just cruising today, and I don't know if they'd had too many pigs in blankets or what the fuck they'd been doing, but
a little bit stuck.
yeah, like genuinely, if you'd have told me they'd all really overdone it on their roast dinner,
the Christmas do last night or something. Yeah,
like, literally, you just either hungover or fucking eating half the box of Lints. I don't know, but dreadful.
Something very wrong.
Yeah.
But let's go into, so as much as I would like to stay as far away as this as possible, let's go into the game a little bit closer. So let's pull apart that first half a bit. To be the bearer of bad news, there was no Charlton chances, and it's not a story that gets better as the game goes on. But yeah, I felt that first, say, 10, 20 minutes, Norwich were definitely the better team, but we did get a foothold in. And as I say, the big thing for me was there were chances, there were mistakes in that team. You can see why, under lack of confidence, they are where they are.
But this is where the frustration comes in, because they, like you said before, like Norwich were actually there to be sort of got at a little bit, like especially when they had that little spell where they were giving the ball away every 5 seconds. If we had really even been half on our game today, we would have created some pretty dangerous chances from those positions because we were in a good
100%.
area of the pitch.
Yep.
Albeit like we didn't quite have your Campbells, your Apters, people with raw pace. We had Tanto on, but he just ran around like a headless chicken the whole game.
Yeah.
And then you had Leeburn, who was just, he was there. He was a little bit of a nuisance, but again, he had not really much going on around him. You got Bree on the far right, who was literally doing nothing. And the far side again, it felt like everywhere where we had anyone in any sort of space, you never ever felt that we were gonna threaten them at all.
No, and they were huffing and puffing. I felt, as I say, and we've discussed this already, that they were definitely in moments. And this is what I've always known. I've seen quite a lot of the Norwich team this season, and they have pretty much all season blown hot at certain points in the game, and then they seem to fall apart a bit. And that seems to go up and down. And I think as Clement's come in, there's a little bit more where they're doing that more consistently for a game rather than dropping off. I think beginning of the season they were having very good first halves and then dropping off at the ends of and in the second half and the end of games, and that's where they were dropping points. But I felt we dealt with them relatively well.
We frustrated them a little bit. Like obviously they, like I say, McCormick hit the post, but apart from that, like nothing really. I think McLean had an early shot that Kaminsky had a great game actually, and any of the sort of shots that came in from range, he dealt with them really well. But yeah, we frustrated them, and again, like we are very good at getting in at half time at 0-0, for example, regrouping and actually pushing on, and that's actually what we ended up doing against Oxford. We sort of played fairly well in the first half, but we managed to sort of regroup, and then those players come off the bench to change the game a little bit, and we never ever had that spark in any of the game, even when we brought the players on off the bench. But I still had like a positive sort of feel at half time.
So I did. I felt going in at half time, they were the slightly better team in a relatively poor game, but it was a tight encounter. And when you're going away to Carrow Road, where, look, you can laugh about where they kind of are in the league and all of that.
Clement is definitely, he's turned them around.
Well, they've had a good home form recently. They have picked up results. They're definitely not the finished article, and there's still a lot of problems there. But realistically, it's a bit like when we played Southampton and they were sitting in 17th and they came and drubbed us at home 5-1. The honest side is, I think most Charlton fans can accept that's not an easy game going into, and it's not necessarily comparative of where they are sitting in the league. So going in 0-0 at half time, we are arguably game plan wise, we're going to be disappointed the fact we haven't created as much, but
we're 0-0.
We've kind of hit what our game plan is, and I think in
especially away from home.
Yeah, all these tough away games and some of the really tough home games, that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to bring it into the 70th, 80th minute and get, even if it's a really crap goal, we're notoriously very good at getting late goals.
Yeah.
And that second half, as I say, felt like it could be a real platform. We've also just tightening up and showing them that we can cause problems, because that's what I felt in the first half. I felt there was getting a relative amount of comfortable side of them realising that actually, even when we got the ball and they were making mistakes, we weren't really capitalising and they didn't look shook by it. And I think if you can start getting a few shots off, a few corners, just a pile up of pressure,
chaos.
that's when we'll get our goal. That's when we'll be at our best. And the second half, as I say, I felt we actually started okay for the first 5 minutes and then just dropped off a cliff. And as I say, it felt very disappointing to me. And I think it also highlighted some of the concerns, and we are going to go on to certain individual players, but one I will highlight now, the Croy Anderson side, for example, where it highlights, as much as I think he's brilliant in certain games and he brings a certain type and dynamic of player that we don't always offer in that kind of more energetic, athletic midfielder, I do feel there is a big chasm in quality of what he's outputting.
Look, I will say, like, a big part of our game under Jones is our high intensity, high press, putting the legs in the game to really make it difficult for the opposition. Now, we weren't horrendous at that. I think we were a bit lethargic. We weren't at our best by all means with the pressing, but we did press them up the pitch a little bit. And then when they had the ball between the defence and the goalkeeper, we were pushing them. They have a bit more quality to be able to play it out from there. What was happening, as soon as they were able to play out of those lines, all of a sudden that midfield felt a bit squeaky, a bit sort of open, and then they were able to pick us off. And I think when we're not on it 100% in that middle of the park. I've said it so many times, but we start to get exposed, and that's where they've started playing the little triangles, and ultimately the goal came from a little move where they sort of pinged a few around the box, and then they drilled it across the box. It was unlucky from Jones, like he has got a footer to clear it, and it's
Yeah.
hit the standing foot of McCommon, literally fallen to his feet, like, and he's just drilled it. Like, you're going to score from there.
And I'm not sure in a game it could have come at a worse point for us, because I feel it's probably the point where we do start to turn the screw. And as I say, if that's a home game, I think there's maybe a bit more response. But I do feel this team, especially in away games and some of the tougher away games, I feel we have a big reliance on keeping it 0-0 and nicking it towards the end.
I think we shrink a little bit as well
Yeah,
when we go
yeah.
1-0 down. Weirdly, though, when we went 1-0 down, even after that, I did think, like, this could be the sort of game where we just nick a late equaliser.
Yeah.
And that's something, again, we did against Birmingham. Like, we sort of weren't playing at our best, but we managed to get a goal.
I don't think, and the realistic crux of where this comes down to in this game, if you have the complete inept ability to get a ball, as I say, and we've discussed this, past the first man, into a dangerous position, cause chaos, beat a man on a run, position yourself properly. If you can't do any of those, realistically, the only way I felt we were probably going to score in that game
Penalty or something.
was a penalty, something really lucky, a keeper mistake. And that's another one that I'd highlight on it that I'm so disappointed at. I have watched, once again, as I say, a reasonably good amount of Norwich games, and their keeper is shaky. He is not the best at kind of when balls are whipped in right on his kind of when he's jumping
He
up.
had one today.
Yeah, he dropped balls from Zil.
He literally was on the edge of his box and missed the ball, and then I think he was offside in the end. But Goff didn't manage to get the ball across, or it might have been Apter actually. But yeah, so he showed glimpses of that, like where he was shaky, but that's where we need, like, and that's where Carey, for example, has been so good for us lately. Is like having a dig from range and just creating a chance and the keeper flapping it or whatever. But we didn't have one shot on target. So how on earth can we create anything when we're not even having a pop shot at the keeper?
Yeah, I think it's pretty.
Really
As I say,
frustrating.
my honest feeling when it comes to that is I think it's unforgivable against the amount of opportunities we were given to take an attack or whatever. To not have a shot on target in that game is pretty criminal. And I think there's got to be, internally with Nathan Jones and the team, etc., there's got to be a look back on that and
They've got to sit back and watch it. We had to bloody watch it on a
to
Boxing
me,
Day,
and I think
like-
there can be arguments towards. We can look at that starting lineup and we can say, okay, we've got holes here. We haven't quite got what we want here. For ideally, you want in that game a Kelman, who we saw last week, a moment of magic, can just get that goal for you. But what we put out there didn't mirror what Nathan Jones wants out of a team, which is, even when you are not the best team, even when the quality is not always quite there, if the effort is there, how many teams have we seen over the years who aren't the absolute best team in the league, but through sheer cohesion of the team and effort and
There
fitness,
was none of that today.
there was none of that,
None
today.
of that.
And that's what disappointed me most.
But I said as well, like, we had to sit through and watch that, and it was diabolical viewing. As a Charlton fan, it was bad. I think as a neutral, it was probably pretty bad. But the bigger thing is actually the fans that have gone up there on a Boxing Day. I know, like, it's your own choice to go up there, fair play, but my word, like, to go up there on a, you know what I mean, like on a Boxing Day where you know you might go up with your family, but some people won't do. They'll go up on their own or whatever with mates. To have to sit through that and, like, to see nothing, not even a glimpse of any sort of any spark whatsoever, is a tough one for them, and I'll give them all the praise.
Yeah, and let's say my most disappointing, I just felt we had the platform coming on from Oxford where we could really, as I say, it's not always about results, and that's what's so disappointing. I think we've probably had that over the last 6-7 weeks or whatever, that we've had this more difficult period. I think everyone can accept that we are going to have runs of form, we are going to have difficult games, and we are going to have disappointing results, but it's when the performance and just the lack of effort comes in, that if you've left everything on the pitch but you're not quite good enough, I think most people can go, fair play. The boys worked hard. It's frustrating and we want better, but not seeing that is just a bit of a...
But that's another thing that Curtis Fleming said after the game, and he said, I'm not actually that disappointed with the result. And I think, like, you can argue that. Like, you could say, like, to lose at Carrow Road isn't a disgrace. Like, it's not. And yes, they've been in bad form, but they've started to pick up, and I think actually it's a tough fixture, that. Like, it is. When you look down the list at the start of the season, that's always going to be quite a difficult one. But what he said was he was incredibly disappointed with the performance, and that's exactly what you're saying. It's like you can, as a fan, you can accept to lose if you put the effort in and you know you've given it a good go. We didn't give it even an inch of a go today.
No.
It's very, very frustrating. The only thing I will say is, like, luckily we got the result last week, so that because if we didn't, you think all of a sudden we would have been
Well,
dire
when you look at the
straits.
way Oxford picked up a win against Southampton, I think Pompey got a draw against QPR, I think it was. But it does now create a big atmosphere around that Pompey game, a place that we've had relatively good success over the years.
Yeah,
But
pretty good there.
it does bring that one up as being a bigger game. Again, we're going to go into that a little bit more in a bit anyway. So going into, I suppose, looking at individual players,
Yeah.
the positive performances and then the negative ones. The negative ones have been a bit more easy. Look, I do think there was some ray of lights that shone through
Yeah, there were
a pretty dim day. But I think we'll start. There's one I want to finish on because I was so impressed. But I think let's start with the person we were so critical of last week, and that would be Kaminsky, because I thought he had a brilliant game. I thought shot stopping wise, he kept us in it at points. And the realistic side is what he offered in that game. For all of the negatives, we might have had one thing that clicked towards the end, and the fact he kept us in at times meant we still had that ability, albeit it never came to fruition. Just a really confident performance. I didn't notice the distribution issues. I thought he was getting the ball out, rolling it out relatively quickly on certain moments.
He still had a couple where he levered it long, but I think all keepers do have occasional ones where they do overhit it. But I think one thing we hammered him for last week was sort of we felt shaky when he had the ball, and that we felt that he didn't really command his area or stuff like that. Today was the opposite. I feel like even when they got into a few positions where they drilled some quite dangerous crosses in, and he calmly sort of took the ball in. You never felt like he was sort of going to flap it or anything like that. He made some really good shot stops, which is what he's probably actually best at. And like you said, he kept us in the game in terms of, like, occasionally those sort of strikes can go in. So if you've got a keeper that is a bit flappy, so he definitely was like, if you're going to look at standout players for us today, which was bloody hard to sort of pick through what we saw today, but he was up there.
Well, I think you have to be, if you're going to be critical last week and criticise all the bits.
You have
We
to
saw
praise
the
him
good
when it's
side.
good.
We saw the amazing side of Kaminsky and what he offers so well, and why we were excited about him in the first place. So, I thought it was really good and nice to have, because I think we have seen some shaky performances recently, and it was just that pretty calm, confident.
Yeah.
Didn't do anything wrong. No,
But even the goal, to be fair, like, it was just
nothing he's doing.
No, like,
Right.
McComas drilled it from 5 yards out. Like, so actually, he's not really put a foot wrong in terms of that. If that's the way that he's going to concede, then there's nothing he can do about it. So.
No, I agree. The second player I would go on to as a positive, and I think maybe it's easier to look at his role as a positive when you're not looking at the technical side as much. But I thought someone who could walk out with their head held high was also Connor Coventry. I thought he had a good game. I think the disappointing thing when it comes to his role is he broke up the midfield well. I thought he pressed well. I thought he harried very well. It was a game where he needed the people around him to be. We know Connor Coventry in certain games, Oxford last week, will sometimes get into more of a role where he's given a bit more time and will ping passes. He did his role very well, and I think the people around him did it very poorly. And I think what we need to see more often is utilising the fact that, yes, in games, Connor Coventry will step in, will be a slightly more technical player. But when he has to play games where he is running, he needs a relief from, and that's where I don't think Roy Anderson works as his partner, because I don't think Roy Anderson offers that. I think he offers a bit more of a frantic, athletic push around, but I think technically is lacking.
I think when you've got two of those sort of players that do a very similar job, where's the creativity? That's my argument. And I think Coventry does bring it in spells, and he did actually against Oxford. We talked about how he was very good at, like, sort of playing those little through balls. But if his sole job in a game is to sort of run around and break the play up, which it was today because you're playing a higher caliber of team, and then you've got Anderson, like you said, next to you, Coventry is always going to give you a certain level, and today he gave it again. It was like he did what he's supposed to do, and he did it well. But your Andersons, for example, are not going to give you that outlet.
But I don't even think it's the outlet. I genuinely think when I look at Anderson, I think games like this highlight why, yes, we can. I think there's a lot, like, look, you go into any youth academy in the country to a certain extent, you can put them in certain games and they can look good. But is Anderson a championship player?
I don't know. I don't know. That is a difficult question.
Because I think Anderson's back up to Coventry.
I think there's glimpses that Anderson has got something there, but I do think he's in between a League One and a Championship player.
I don't think that. I think
he's low.
I think he's low. I think he's probably in a few years' time. I think he's probably a good League One player. I don't.
You could be right. You
I
could be
just,
right. I don't know.
well, the thing I struggle with is, for example, I think the conversations around certain players. I think when we look at what we praise Anderson for in a lot of games, I think the praise generally sits around his work rate, his this, but very rarely are we having that technical kind of side of any conversation. In my opinion, I think we can see he'll play a pass out left, right, okay, but for me,
Yeah, he does. He struggles with sort of. I think
I
when
think he's come in.
when you break the lines, he looks out of his depth. I think when he gets into that little gap where he's on the edge of the opposition's box and he's got a bit of time on his hands, you never quite know what he's going to do. I
No,
don't mean he's got the strike in his locker either. So then it's like
no. Well,
he's
he
always
came,
looking for the pass.
I think he came in. I think why Charlton fans maybe get excited, especially when he came in recently and had some good performances. And look, you got to give him credit where it's due. He has had some good performances recently. It's quite easy to excite from a relatively low bar. And when we've had some of the performances we've had recently and the poor performances from your Docks, etc., you see him come in for one game, have a good performance, you think he's the answer. I don't think he is. I think his style of play
No,
is the
what
answer.
people like is they like seeing the hard hitting
Yeah,
tackles and
yeah.
where he gets the crowd up, and he does do that sometimes.
And I
which is
think
actually
maybe
good.
on that side there is a squad player in there, and that's where maybe it's the case. But I'm not sure I see. But yeah, as I say, going back to where we go on Coventry, yeah, I thought a pretty solid performance and probably a standout of a pretty poor midfield.
Yeah.
The one that I would like to heap a lot of praise on, I think to come in at the age he is and be, for me, the standout defender of the day, I don't think put a foot wrong. And actually, if you were to look at a lot of positives that we had in that performance, he screams above everything else, is Goff. And I thought just to come in for your full professional debut, Carrow Road
Tough
on
place to
Boxing
go.
Day, tough place to go, and to be the relatively standout player, and one that I could not put really any criticism on as a
No, it's
performance.
solid.
And also, like, it wasn't just defensively.
No,
was
he
pushing
looked
up
good
into
going
good
forwards.
positions. And I think, from what I understand, he has, I think, played a few different positions, like holding mid. So he clearly has got, he's not just that kind of almost like Lloyd Jones, you're just the centre-back. He's got a bit more in his locker, and I think you could see that.
I was reading through Twitter earlier and someone made a good point. It was like the one or two times that he got forward, he put a couple of good balls into the box. And it was like, if Bree literally can't hit a barn door today, why aren't we just pushing him forward a little bit more, giving him the opportunity to actually put those crosses in where Bree clearly couldn't, and maybe just mixing it up a little bit? And I think there again is just highlighting that actually we're a bit rigid sometimes, and Bree got left on the pitch for probably far too long. He was left on set piece duty for far too long. I know we're going to talk about him in a minute, so I won't bang on him, but I've got to be in my box about him.
Yeah.
But
Right, charge it all up.
yeah. but no, in terms of Goff, like, he gave us what Bree didn't, and I know he was playing a bit deeper. He was part of the three at the back, but he like you said, didn't put a foot wrong. He was solid. Everything he did was composed. He had a couple of moments where I think their Norwich's boys won the ball back, and he was straight on them and won it straight back again. So he was one that was probably showing the most effort. But obviously it's his debut. He wants to impress, and he clearly did. And actually, Jones will sit up and say, actually, this is an example of a player that is going to give his all, is going to, wants to be in that starting 11, and actually that might give him sort of that motivation to say, actually, yeah, you've earned another game.
And just so exciting as well as just a
Another
another
academy.
academy product, just conveyor belt of. You think this season it'd be full of Goff, you've got Anderson in the squad, you've got Leeburn, you've got TC. It's quite sensational that we've got that integration. I think the worry sometimes is that I think we've got to find that balancing act between it, I think, with certain players. But as I say, I think as professional debuts go, in the situation of everything there, I think Curtis Fleming once again summed it up so well. It would have been so easy for them to play someone else, so Amari Bell in the centre back role, chuck someone out like an Apter or a TC, and we kind of just we plug it with people out of position.
I think they went off meritocracy, and we know that Goff played in the game against Oxford, and he put a really good shift in. So actually, he's earned his right to get a go in the side, and today he showed why that was. Like the fact that he is actually stepping up. Like I say, actually, a 19-year-old is probably one of the biggest leaders on the pitch in that game. Just says it all.
Well, I also thought so impressive to show at centre back, because centre backs generally are the ones that actually take a bit more time, and are generally the ones that come in a bit older with that more kind of solid head. And to have that as your first performance is, as I say, exciting.
It's definitely exciting, and he's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, as I say, I thought that was a gleaming star out of the performance today,
100%.
because it was so nice to see. Now let's move on to well, the bar humbug section of the of the pod. So the poor performances. I think there's a lot of players in there you could say didn't cover themselves in glory. I thought, yeah, there was. It was quite easy to criticise, but I think there was some standout. We will leave a certain person more towards the end. One we have already covered over a little bit, but I think there's some conversations we can have around. For me, one of the poorer performances was Carrow Anderson.
Yeah.
Now, we've gone over where I think we feel the negatives come with him. Where do you see the future in regards to that? And do you see it in the same light as me? Because as I've already said today, my view is I think Carrow Anderson has highlighted the kind of player we need. I just don't think whether he's ready, or my gut feeling is the quality is ever going to be there. Do you think that's something now that we have to look at in January as a replacement, or do you genuinely believe that we can go through the season with a Carrow Anderson?
So I'm not overly concerned that we're going to struggle. Like, okay, we're not looking in a great position right now, but I do still believe, and I've said it throughout, that we will have enough to stay up this season. And that's going off the current squad. That's going off the squad we've had from the beginning of the season. Now, I know we will probably strengthen slightly in January. Let's be realistic. We're not going to massively make big signings in January.
No.
Realistically, that squad we've got now is going to be seen to sort of see us out till the end of the year or the end of the season. Where I see Anderson is he is a stopgap for where we are as a team at this moment in time. So I think we're in a transitional period as a club anyway. We've just got promoted. We are building ourselves up to be pushing up the middle to playoff positions in the future in the Championship. Now, in order to do that, we've got to sort of go through those sort of stages where we may have to just stick with what we've got. And I feel like that's the boat we're in right now.
But then I guess when you look at that, I 100% agree it's the building blocks, but there is a January transfer window coming up. We have opportunities for building blocks. Do you see that as one of the more immediate decisions? Because for me, it is.
Well, creativity in that middle has been I bang on about it every week, and I say, like, the reason we lose certain games is because we get massively outplayed in the middle of the park. And we don't have that. We've got players with legs, and he sits into that category. He's got the legs. He's got the athleticism. You talk about it when you talk about how when he plays well. Coventry's the same. He's got the legs. He's got more ability to be able to play a pass. So that already puts him in above Anderson. I think he's much better player than Anderson anyway. So Anderson is the sort of player, and he's obviously been swapped out for Doherty. And Doherty, we talk about, has potential, but he never fully fulfills it. And he's, again, another one that frustrates us because he hasn't quite got that ability to really push on.
And is there the somewhat forgotten man in this scenario as well, which is we've seen it as a setup.
Nibs.
It's one that I personally am still sitting as one of my favourite setups that we have in our arsenal, is the Coventry Carey playing in the Anderson role and Nibs up.
We need 100. If I was picking the team, and I'm clearly not, he would be playing, because
do you think that's what we need to see in the Pompey? Do you think we've maybe because I feel a bit like the TC scenario where he came out of the squad and we need it at a certain point. As much as I've been, I think he's put in some solid performances. I don't think anything Carrow Anderson I've been absolutely blown away. Apart from, I think there was the one game he did get. Potentially was it man of the match, but he played very well.
Well, he came on against Middlesbrough and changed it a little bit. He played really well, but he's had some games where he's really played well. But what I would say with Anderson, he's so limited. Like, he is limited in his, and that's not his fault. He's got a certain set of skills, but we can't then expect a certain level of football in the middle of the park if we're going to play players that have that limited skill set. And Doherty fills into that as well. And that's why I think someone like Harvey Nibs, for example, has got a more free-flowing play to his game. He's stronger. He's able to push himself up the pitch. He will have a pop. Look at how he did for Reading. I know it's a lower level, but he was getting goals.
And is there also an argument to say it's pretty criminal? And this is where I'll come to Anderson's defence to a certain extent. And I think you can now start to look into the system. But is there a relative side of being Anderson maybe alongside Coventry works when you've got... So if you've already got Gillespie, Jones and Goff, you've got Coventry, you've got Anderson, and then you've also got James Bree and Amari Bell either side, that is an incredibly... in my opinion, incredibly defensive. And would Carrow Anderson maybe, where he might show... Where it might be a bit better is if you did have, say, for an Apter and then TC one side, that then means that your creativity is coming from a different outlet. When, with me, this system, you're relying on someone like an Anderson. It's too negative.
Yeah.
And that's what I think maybe on the other side of today's performance, and where you can maybe give people like Roy Anderson a bit of slack, where you can maybe even give players like Leeburn a slack, is that actually
People around
the
him.
system
Yeah,
kind of kiboshed
yeah,
a little bit and
yeah.
actually
I agree.
cause some deeper problems as well. And I understand Jones has got this way of playing, but surely there's got to be a point in game where you go, look, there is an opportunity here, and maybe we need to change things up. And I know there was subs
It's
didn't
why he
really
does it though. He brings Apter on, he brings TC on, but a lot of the time it's quite late on, and it's like you don't really give it enough time to really sort of. Because also, again, you're playing a sort of system where you're bringing players on in the same sort of positions, but you're bringing TC on at left wing back, and that's not his best position at all.
Yeah.
So it's really frustrating. Anderson, not his greatest game, but again, I don't think there were many players that you could say had a great game. So
I think he needs to be stepping back into a squad role, and
yeah,
to me, that's not a bad thing, because there was not long ago where I'd have said Anderson would be one of my people to be out the door completely, and actually, I think there is a squad player.
No,
there's a really good job.
There's a position for him in our squad.
Yeah,
as
100%.
it stands.
I just think, to me, he's starting to prove there's definitely not a starting position, or if he is, it's got to be in a slightly different system that doesn't rely on him being any kind of creative outlet.
Yeah.
Let's move on to, once again, it could have been a discussion on many on the creative side, but one I was especially disappointed with was Tanto.
I just again Alafe. Yeah, we've been pulled up on that a few times. He is one that is again such a frustration because he's got a lot of potential. He's got a lot of raw attributes that could cause teams absolute nightmares. And again, today is a prime example. You're coming up against a defence that is ship goals for fun. And we didn't even give him one opportunity. Well, not even give him an opportunity. He didn't give himself the opportunity. He could have picked the ball up in that area of the pitch, which he was gifted it a couple of times. He could have run straight at their defence. Like, they're not going to enjoy that.
Runner, isn't he? And I do like what he offers and what he does.
But even being a clunky runner, you win fouls. Like, you win fouls.
His performance was summed up, I think, in the first half. He ran up against one of their defenders. Right at the end, kicked the ball, kicked it into the fans, and then ended up falling down the camera.
Yeah.
That's pretty much.
But at least in that moment, he showed a little bit of what he can do. Like beat his man at the wing back they had. He beat him, and he nearly drilled the ball across the box. The guy got a good block in, but that's what we should be seeing him doing regularly in a game, like all the time.
So then the question around players like Alaf is, I feel we Alafe. Sorry. Oh Christ. I'm gonna get told off in the comments again. But no, when I look at Tanto, that's the easier one. Can we afford in our squad to have such a high level of inconsistent players? And that's maybe where some concern is, because I feel like, as I say, maybe with Tanto you can afford him to have an off day when other players around him are more consistent. But when we are talking so much throughout this season about consistency, do you believe that is becoming an issue? Because for me, it is. When you're going into a game, even if everyone else behind is playing well, but we've got Leeburn, who we're saying is an on-off player. We've then got Tanto, who we're saying is an on-off player. How can you run how can you go into games not knowing whether either your strikers are going to be on form?
This is one thing we spoke about a few videos ago, and I still believe we're in this boat, is you have to accept that we are at a certain level at the moment where we've come up and we've strengthened. We said we didn't ever expect us to spend the money we spent in the summer. We spent around £10 million, which was like well above where we thought we would be spending. So the owners have put their money where their mouth is and strengthened the squad, but we are still at a stage where we have a predominantly League One squad with some quality Championship players sprinkled in there at the moment. And I say quality Championship players. Some of the best players we've had have been players we've plucked from League One and just stepped up. So it's not even that they're experienced Championship players. They're players that have come up and actually done really well for us. But we have to really recognise that there are going to be games where we are outplayed because the calibre of the teams that we're coming up, and critically actually squads, the depth of people's squads, that we're playing teams that are able to bring players on that are on 30, 40, 50 grand a week off the bench. We're nowhere near that right now. So, and I even look at Norwich as a team, and I think, like, yes, I don't rate their squad highly. I think they've signed really poorly, and I think they're not actually that threatening. But they've still got players in that squad that are worth a lot of money.
But you've got to look, that's the difference between being a team who over the last 10 years have yo-yoed between the Prem and the Champ, and a team that have pretty much dwindled in League One most of that time. There is a huge gap in class. And yeah, look, I agree with you. I don't look at that squad and think that is a £50 million squad, which is what they've kind of spent over the last couple of seasons. But clearly, even their poorer players, they've got a lot of championship-ish level players who, yes, they may not be at the heights what they want to be a playoff chasing side at the moment, but I mean, they've
Well,
even
Harry
got.
Darling, for example, is like a player that was rated as one of the best centre backs in the division.
But that squad today was quite crippled with injuries. I know Norwich have got quite an injury crisis at the moment, missing players like Sargent. They're missing a few of the boys they've kind of signed in the summer. So realistically, to be able to still put out that starting lineup, which in many kind of positions and kind of ways.
There you go. Look, we're talking about Josh Sargent, Chris
Mm.
Garden. We're talking about players with real high caliber quality.
Mm.
And then we're talking about Tanto Alafe,
Mm.
who has come up from Stockport, fairly like good sort of pedigree, but he's nowhere near the level of those boys you just
No.
talked about.
No.
And that's the what we're talking about. Like they are the difference.
Mm.
And that's not to say that Charlton aren't going to get there, and we will if we can continue to
We
sort
will.
of
Yeah.
stay up and then strengthen. We will get to that stage. But at the moment, we do have to accept that we are going to be outplayed in games, and there are going to be times where we just don't have those players to come on and make the impact we need.
I think
to.
and that's where, but the disappointing where that came in today is that I don't think it was about that today, and that's where
No,
it is.
no.
That's where it
Today it
frustrates.
wasn't, and there will be games where it is.
Mm.
Today it wasn't, but we then had. We're talking about players that maybe aren't quite up to it yet, that just aren't performing, and then there's your problem.
Well, if we're going to go on to the final of underperforming, someone who I know you've been waiting with bated breath, let's move on to which for me was the most disappointing one of the day by a country mile, James Bree.
I am ready to tear his head off, but at the same time, one thing I will say before I lay into him is he has, in certain games, he's changed games. There have been games this season where we have been crying out for someone that's going to bring quality in terms of the crosses, and he's done that. And he's actually popped up with some really important goals himself. Today was not one of those days. And every player, I will say, like, players will have their off days. And as a team, we had an off day today. But my God, like, if you want to have an example of a player who's just everything that he did in that game went badly wrong for him, that was it.
Well, and
It
also
was so
again,
bad.
the frustrating thing with him is we've given him a lot of allowance as well for performances where, if you look at actually a lot of the early praise we were giving him, it wasn't about a 90-minute performance, it was about moments. And what he to have him in the squad, he was there for those moments. He was there to unlock a key when we just couldn't quite find a way through. For me, the set pieces today were pretty criminal, and it wasn't even that they just weren't quite getting the right person. I think there must have been a good 60-70% of them that were not even clearing the first man. And to me, that's just so unbelievably frustrating, and is the difference between us potentially, and not guaranteed, but getting a result, getting a chance or not.
We scored goals from headers, from corners, from free
But
kicks
also,
regularly this
when I look at someone like that, and I think actually I'm not sure if James Bree, we were very complimentary the last game, but actually when you look at performance going towards that, I don't know if there's an element of rose-tinted goggles because of how well he started. Because actually, I think there's been quite a few moments in games where I don't think he's been as amazing. And actually, the set pieces have gone very, very downhill since that initial start. They have started to drop off a little bit more, and there's odd ones, but they're not on the penny each time. And when you look at players who you have in your squad, because they are that, they're normally fiercely consistent at that one quality that means they're in the squad.
But that's exactly it. You're right. Like Bree, if he's not on it with his crossing, what massively else does he?
Options.
Well, that's what I'm saying. And also, he's playing wide right. He's playing a wing back role. So if he's not got the raw pace, he's not someone that's going to be dribbling at their wing backs. So the thing he has to offer is quality passing or quality crossing, which is what he did bring us in many of the games that we've talked about. But more recently, he started not bringing that. And then also, he's not offering the pace and the threat down the sides.
And he's also, like,
So
you look
what
at the
does
Brum
Bree-
game, for example, he got bullied off the ball by Damari Gray. I think defensively, we've definitely highlighted over the few weeks that there are some negatives. And I think the Oxford game is the one where he shone recently, and we were very complimentary of what he offered, and I was especially. But actually, if you take that away and go over the last 6-7 games, there's not.
He's not been great.
He's not been great. And then I suppose the question comes, we've got him, I believe,
till January.
And I think it is the beginning of January.
Yeah.
So we've got him for arguably maybe 2 more games at the moment.
Do we start looking at?
Do we start looking? Do we commit to him, or do we go for something else? And
that is a tough call now.
my gut feeling is you go somewhere else.
I think so. I think like he's given us a lot in terms of, like I said, there's been games this year where he has massively changed the game. He's brought that one moment where he's just put in a wicked cross and we've scored. And like fair play to him. And we praised him massively at the time. I think at one moment we were saying, oh, like he could be player of the season in terms of
Mm.
the way he was playing. Now all of a sudden he's dropped off and we're really noticing it. And I think we've got other options that could bring a different type of threat down that side. And maybe it's the time, like you said, with his loan coming on to an end, one, Jones has got a big call to make in terms of does he renew, does he sign him, whatever, like whatever he decides to do. But if he doesn't, we really need to start looking at options in terms of what he can bring, or
Yep.
what someone else can bring
Yep.
to that part of the pitch. And for me, the sort of lack of quality shown in the last few games, I'm starting to towards the maybe just let
Yeah,
go.
and I'm not 100% sure he works our system. I think he does for the set pieces, and if they're always on point, 100% he's worth his weight in gold. But as I say, those discussions at the beginning of the season where he would be the difference in the games where we weren't performing,
Mm.
and actually we're seeing more frequently that actually he can be somewhat the root of some problems, because if we're not performing, he's not delivering. And then we also have the fact that as a player, I think overall he's not the most influential when it comes to defensively,
No,
and can
doesn't
be
offer
quite
that much
restrictive
defensively.
attacking.
Yeah.
Is he really the best kind of player for that position?
But
And I
but in terms of like a player to watch in terms of levels of frustration today was unbelievable. And also he must have known that he was just well off it with his deliveries. Why on earth did we not switch it out earlier? Like I think Carey started taking over corners about the 80, 78th
is it in the
minute.
hope of it being the one
Maybe like
that
that
he
he
has that
could
in his
like
locker?
suddenly hit some sort of decent cross into the box, but it never came.
No.
And actually, like that was the most frustrating performance I think I've watched this season
Mm.
in terms of knowing what a player can offer and actually just not bringing anything to the table.
Yeah.
Like I say, I don't know. Like players have bad games, but that one was dreadful today.
Yeah, and I think so. If you look actually back on it, away from a few little moments, I think that's a conversation we're having far too frequently. As I say, my gut feeling now, if you ask me today, would be go elsewhere and find something else.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because Nathan Jones has
He quite likes him.
quite likes him. I'm not sure that is where we're going to end up with it, but we will see. So,
Find it.
well, there we are. That is the Boxing Day Norwich game.
Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. You had a good one.
Merry Christmas to everyone. Hopefully I enjoyed it. But it has highlighted a little bit more importance going into that next game, and that's what we'll quickly want to go over now. That Portsmouth game now is once again, because of some results that went round, I don't think it's a complete and utter make or break of the season, but it's definitely an
Big.
important one, and one that we discussed, and our favourite word of the last episode was buffer. And I think we could really do with that, especially they are, when we look on paper, one of the teams that we're going to have.
You know what, as well? Our game in hand is Portsmouth as well.
Mm.
So we've actually got another. We're at some.
So they could be quite game changing.
Well, yeah, exactly. So we will actually also have another game pop up probably in January,
Mm.
February time where we play them again. But I think you're right. We've got a really good record at Fratton Park because it is at Fratton Park this one. Yeah. So
We've
that
taken amazing following as well.
Yeah, the fans love that fixture, and for some reason we seem to always do very, very well there. But the pressure has ramped up a level because of now where the table sits, where Portsmouth have dropped down.
Yeah, Pompey dropped into, you look at the last five, they got a 1-0. So they got a 1-0 loss against Bristol, 1-0 loss against Swansea, 2-1 win against Blackburn, and then a 1-1 draw against both Derby and QPR. So when you look at them, they're not in the finest place form-wise. They're stumbling through.
Yeah.
They've managed to, as I say, kind of stick above that kind of relegation zone, but they are now getting dropped in. And you look at teams like Norwich now starting to turn the screw and change their fortune.
Oxford won today as well.
Yeah, I think
there's a lot of pressure on.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and I don't know how that can work both ways, especially on a home game. It can get them fired up to really want to now start fighting, or it puts the pressure on them and they struggle. And I think we've got a great opportunity there to.
Well, we're away from home, so actually the pressure is usually on the home side, especially when they're down there. If we get the first goal, for example, that will get jittery at Fratton Park. Like they definitely will. The fans will start getting a bit nervy. So I think the big thing for us is to get off to a good start. We cannot put in a performance like we did today, because otherwise we will get walked over once again. So it's really important that we learn our lessons from Norwich today. Because
do you feel like a bit like with the Oxford game though, coming up against a squad that maybe isn't as technically gifted, we will have more opportunity.
It will help,
and there's certain players who maybe it will allow to get into the game a little bit more with a little bit more confidence.
I also think we'll see more. I think we might see like Campbell, for example, come back into the side. He's been out for a couple of games now. I think he's probably raring to go in terms of getting us. Jones will have watched the game today and known that we probably need a bit more bite on the wings. We need to get the ball up the pitch quicker, and actually bringing Campbell back in, maybe looking at bringing another pacier player down the right as well, and seeing whether we can start pushing the ball up the pitch.
Do you think there's an argument, because it's a name we saw obviously come in but haven't seen him on the pitch, a potential argument for
Ruslan, maybe. We haven't seen him at all.
You've got them potentially the Amari, but I don't know with Ramsey. It didn't sound like he's probably going to be back over the Christmas period, albeit quite cagey. But yeah, I wonder if maybe that's
it might be an option. It might be. I mean, the games are thick and fast now, so it's like a 3-day turnaround, isn't it? So we'll definitely see some changes. I think like they will look like there's some tired legs in there today already, and like I say, don't know if it was overindulgence or just pure awful.
Do you think there's an argument for Nibs to come into this game?
Yes.
Because I think it's one that he could be in his element, especially being that kind of quite towering figure and commanding.
You do what you suggested, and you take Anderson out, you put Nibs in, and you push Carey up a bit higher. Yeah, that could absolutely happen.
Because I wonder if maybe a slightly more defensive, especially with Mari Bell back playing that left wing back role. Look, we don't know where that's going to sit, but if that was again, I think there's an argument to playing out Apter, who has a bit more kind of raw pace and a bit more exciting side, and then a Carey Nibs, and just inject a bit more attacking.
We need more offerings going down the wings when we're pushing the ball up the pitch, and that has to change after today's performance. So I want to see some changes. Definitely be interesting, but it's a huge game now, and also this time of year, like I said, games come thick and fast. So even after that, we got another quick turnaround. New Year's Day, we've got Coventry, which is going to be a bloody tough one again. So it's like,
back to the organ grinder.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So that sums up, I think, everything towards this episode of the pod.
It was a tough one.
Yeah, it was a tough one, but also look, let's go down the same old avenue we do whenever I think we have these kind of defeats. We can get quite down, very frustrated. I think that's the thing with it, is a frustrating performance, but onwards and upwards. As I say, the game against Pompey, let's have everything crossed. Let's get a performance out there. One thing, I will quickly bring up the league table. As you'll see, sitting in 17th, a little bit of a tighter gap between the relegation zone now, dropped down 5 points.
We did say as well, though, like, we got to the end of 2025, having our first season back in the Championship for 5 years. Would we have taken where we're sat, 17th in the league?
My God.
Yeah.
As I say, I think a lot of the frustration that comes from Charlton fans at the moment is if you had a much more equal level of these results of the beginning of the season.
Sporadic nature of the performance.
Yeah, and I think it's the fact we've just gone from there to there, and it's a bit all over the place. We're turning up some days good, some days not as good. That's what kind of, I think, creates some of the head loss moments.
Yeah.
It is frustrating, but overall, 100%. If you said going into the beginning of the season would be 5 points above relegation, sitting in 17th with a game in hand, I think that's a bloody good position to be in.
It's fair.
And
Jones doing a good job.
Yeah, I've got quite an interesting one, I think, for the next video. So it's going to be, the next one's going to be the last one before going into the new year. And I think it's just a bit of a comparison looking back on when you feel a bit down towards where we might be, or the performances, looking back on years gone by, because my God, you feel good when you look back on that. So
how far we've come.
Yeah, how far we've come. So well, we will leave it there. As I say, I hope everyone has had a great Christmas and looking forward into that next game. We can get 3 points and start moving back up that table. So we will see you on the next one.